to starting. Okay, I think we're good. Says live, hangout on air is live. We're good whenever you want to start.
Okay. Hello and welcome to season. Wait, is this season 2 or season 3? It's season 3, right?
Uh, when's the cutoff?
No, but we're in the new season. Wait, we're definitely in the new season, but
This is your
this
podcast.
is
I'm just a guest here, so
I
I
thought
don't
this
know.
was season two.
um yeah, it must be season 2. Hold on, let me check. Do we? Is this the third
When did we
season
roll
we're
over?
doing?
When did we roll over into the new season?
We roll over. We roll over. We roll. This is episode 3 of whatever season we're in.
Oh,
I
then
I
think
maybe
forget
it's
it's
if we're
season
season
third.
three.
2 or
I
3.
think it's season three. I think you
Yeah, I think
started
yep,
like
season
halfway
3
through
too.
season one
I think that's right. Let me just double check.
because the Rogue Pod was like 2.5 or something
What's it?
last year. It was during the
Um,
season.
yeah, this is season 3. Okay, I'm good. Hello and welcome to season 3, episode 3 of the Collier Pod. I am your host, David Horn, owner of the First Place Jabberwocks. With me, defending champion, owner of the defending champion Dirty Dog Nation, Brian Lesky. And tonight, a very special guest sitting in the seat ordinarily reserved for Gabe Gold. We have owner of the First Place Splicers and a special guest because it's most special because he's joining us from the Rogue Pod, Dan Height. Height, welcome to the Collier Pod.
Thanks. Those are some big shoes to fill. I'll do my best.
Lusky, how you doing tonight, man?
I'm so excited to talk about the splicers. Actually, so I don't know if this is on the agenda, so let's just get it out of the way now. Which of Height's team names over the years is the best team name? Because I'm pretty sure it's not the splicers. Can we
I'm
can we
glad
go
you brought
through
that
them?
up. I'm glad you brought that up because on a recent pod you were critical of the Splicer team name history. So and I think how you had a chance to
Yeah,
rebut some of that on the Rogue Pod. But why don't you flesh out your rebuttal just so we have it on this pod?
sure. Yeah, I mean, I think I addressed it last time, but there were two times when I shared teams essentially. One time was with Horn, and we were the DH Splicers because we have the same initials. And then I went back to it when my son was born, and I missed the draft, and Jones was drafting for me. So yeah, I
Lusky,
mean that.
What's your problem with it? Like what
No,
exactly is
no,
your gripe?
now hold on. I don't have a problem with it. Why you got to bring up old stuff? I actually respect and appreciated the explanation on the Rogue Pod. I will accept that, but that is separate and beside the question I asked, which is of all of the team names that Hyde has had over the years, which is the best? Because we've had the DH splicers and the GT splicers and the gay team and
Haterade.
Haterade, however you say it. Like, we've had a lot of options, right? Am I missing any?
Well, the Splicers, which is like the classic now that he's sort of settled on.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I'll say this: I definitely have a least favorite, which is the gay team, and it's my least favorite because it's like it mars all of the UAFBL history in a way. Like our T-shirts that say "gay team" on them, I'm uncomfortable wearing in public, even more uncomfortable than I am wearing the UAFBL T-shirts generally. And like the trophy says the "gay team" on it, which just doesn't reflect. It doesn't age well in 2017. How do you feel about that part of
That's
your
fair. I mean,
history?
I thought of it more as like an A team reference with the fact that Rudy Gay I think was like a 3-year keeper for me at the time. But I can certainly understand the optics of how that comes across, and I'm much happier with my current team name, along with a history that kind of goes with it. I'm just
Um,
clicking through. Ragnar's Fleet was one of my first team names in 2002, pre
Oh, that's a good
modern
one.
era.
yeah,
My
maybe we
personal
should go back to
favorite
that.
is
Maybe we should wear a throwback jersey this year and go with Ragnar's
Ragnar's
Fleet.
nice.
yeah, Ragnar's Fleet has kind of like a walks like literary dork thing going
Yeah,
on to it,
I
right?
like that.
Yeah.
I feel like throwback jerseys would be good. Maybe we should spend a month of like in January, everyone picks their favorite old team name that they use,
Mine's Tinsley
and
and Bargnani.
I don't think Cassidy Redhawks has ever had anything other than Cassidy Redhawks, so he'll just rock the classic jersey. Anything else you wanted to get out of the way before we get to do the deep dive into the Splicers, Les?
Now let's get to it.
All right. So we've done this once before. I think we had Phil on last year, and we did sort of a deep dive into the Keep Show, which I thought was really it turned out to be a really useful exercise for me at least. Like it's good to go back through somebody's team. Like we all spend a lot of time thinking about our own teams and not that much time thinking about anyone else's team from a like historical standpoint, season over season over season, how each season relates to the next, and what other managers' sort of trajectories are. So I found it really useful for Phil. And then I think Phil really enjoyed talking through it on the pod, and then a bunch of people who listened said that they enjoyed, having the time to think about the Keep Show. So I'd like to do something similar this time. It's the second time we've done it with the Splicers, and so I had the opportunity the other day to sort of go back through and take some notes on what you've been doing the last couple of years, Height, and there's some ups and downs, and so I'm excited to get into it with you. Lusk, why don't you? I sent you my notes. I haven't shared these with Height, and I'm just curious what your like initial reaction to them was, looking at the five. Well, actually, I think I tracked back to his championship in 2010, 11, or whatever it was, 2007, 2008.
You went back all the way.
Yeah. Well, in part, and then more detailed notes recently. But Lusky, what was your initial reaction to the?
The thing that actually there were a couple things that struck me, but the thing that struck me most was the kind of Harden era, right? So Height had debatably one of the top 5 or 10 keeper contracts in UAFBL history, right?
Yeah,
James
agreed.
And it was kind of like right when Harden blossomed into being a top 5 player, and you had him for at least 3 consecutive drafts, right? Maybe four.
Yeah, 4 years, I think. But I traded him in the middle.
You traded him at the end.
Yeah.
So you had him for all 3 years of the keeper contract.
So what was amazing to me about this whole thing, right? That you had Harden for 3 years, and like, believe me, no one would ever gripe with the fact that you held on to him. It was this amazing contract. But the strange thing for me was that in all 3 seasons, the player that you paid most for was the same player.
Other than the Curry year, right?
But in the Curry year, you didn't draft this guy. This was after in the first 3 years, it was Al-Jeff.
I love me some Al-Jeff.
95, 99, 97, I think.
Yeah.
And I just, so here's the thing, like, I understand this dynamic duo concept, and you want to get your 2 stars, pair them together, but if you do it once and it doesn't work, fine. Why go back to the well a second time and a third time? What I'm just curious, was there something about that, or was it accidental that you kept ending up with those 2 guys?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was accidental. I honestly couldn't tell you exactly what happened there. But I never really go into a draft saying I need to have this guy or that guy, really. Mostly looking for value. And for whatever reason at the time, I thought that Al-Jeff had value. I mean, this was when he was still good, at least.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was nothing intentional there. And obviously it didn't exactly work out how I wanted it to, but I got him that last year, right? When I got Steph.
No. In the last year, you did the Curry thing, and you got Miles Turner that last year too. But the other interesting thing about the Al-Jeff years was what was I thinking? Oh yeah, I found myself. I literally was like, wait a second. Height's like propensity is toward UConn players, and so I was going to his Wikipedia page and seeing I had forgotten that Al-Jeff was one of those straight from high school guys, and I was like, oh, certainly he must have some tie to UConn.
I feel like Height. I think there was a time when your propensity for UConn guys shone through in the auction. I feel like it's been a while. Maybe that's because UConn hasn't produced a lot of top tier guys, although you do have some Kemba.
Yeah, and I don't really follow. I mean, I definitely don't follow. I don't follow college basketball as much anymore, and then I certainly don't follow UConn as much. It's much more Michigan. But back when we were starting, like 2003, 2004, it was still very much.
So speaking of UConn, Height, what there was some controversy on Slack tonight over criticisms of the Yahoo app because Andre Drummond was shown to have hit like 4 out of 5 threes.
Is that not correct?
Well, I don't know. I don't know what's true anymore. Can I not rely on the Yahoo app? Is it just like a preseason thing because the stats are funky during preseason?
Yeah, I'm sure it's the stat. I don't know what happened, but I'm sure the stats are funky during preseason. The stats provider, in this case, I think NBA, we get them directly from, or Stats Inc. Like they always change stuff, and so they're having issues. Most of the time, if stats are wrong, it's going to be on the stats provider, not to just like, throw the issue over the fence. But usually, if the stats are wrong, especially live stats, we just pass through what they're sending us.
That's a very responsible position that you take. I don't think it can be correct that Drummond hit 4 and 5 threes.
How many did he hit? 7 out of 8?
Three threes at least. Yeah. Who are the other? So Kemba and Drummond. Who are the
Gay.
other? Gay is sort of fading, but who's
Karan
left?
Butler, who I might see on Monday.
Why are you going to see Karan Butler on Monday?
Oh, he's coming to something at Yahoo to do some draft. You missed that on Slack last week or a few days ago.
Was that on the Dad's channel?
No, it was not on the Dad's channel. Though I do want to ask you about. That is a thing that I want to ask you about later.
That's a Rogue Pod thing, dude. I ask the questions on the Collier Pod. Have me onto your pod if you want to ask me questions.
So we're doing this Playmakers draft in LA on Monday. And
is it like the big fantasy?
Is it the big what?
Is it like the big 3 for fantasy? You invite a bunch of washed up NBA guys?
No. It's like social influencers. So I sent the list over Slack, and I was like, has anybody heard of any of these guys? No, he's not. Hold on. I'm supposed to on Butler part. It's a bunch of like YouTube bloggers, kids, and we were talking on Slack about how nobody, we're all old and don't know who any of these guys are. But Karan Butler is going to be there as like a commentator, basically after draft picks, to like film little like segments about what he thinks of each player, that sort of thing.
And all the millennials in your office are like, "Who's Karan Butler?" And you're like, "Oh, dude, this is amazing." UConn player.
So there's another guy that was not UConn, but I feel like you had a UConn like affection for.
Was it Roy Hibbert?
No, but close.
I never got Roy Hibbert.
No, it was the Manimal.
Oh yeah,
Did
you?
Yeah, I kept him. I mean, he was good when he first came up, right? I think I got him as a rookie, and he was good.
He was better as a rookie than he is now, it turns out.
Very true.
Guess how many 3-pointers Andre Drummond hit tonight?
In fact. What's your source?
I have the right data.
How do you know the data's right?
Because this is once the game's closed out and they close the books, it's done.
All right. How many threes did he hit?
0.
Yeah. How many did he attempt?
1. He attempted 1.
So it was Fareed for a little bit. It was Fareed and Lawson, right? I was like literally Lawson. On Denver, because I had both of them as keepers, and Lawson also did not turn out so good.
Do the WNBA teams play in a college gym?
I do not know the answer to that question.
No, I mean, I think it depends, right? Like the one that plays in that casino in Connecticut, they have their own stadium and whatnot. It's pretty good.
Right. No. But I'm on NBA TV and they're showing the highlights. Tonight was like the finals from the WNBA finals, and so the Minnesota Lynx. It looks like they play in the same gym as the as the University of Minnesota. And so it has like the colors of the University of Minnesota. It has the Big Ten logo on the floor. It's not a great look, I gotta say.
Some guy in the office was trying to get me to parlay the Lynx with like NC State or something. It was preseason NBA today, and we had no interest.
But you love pure gambling. That is pure fucking gambling. I think you should have done it because I think the Lynx won.
That sounds right.
So my initial take on the Splicers trajectory, I think my take even before I pulled up the data and it was confirmed by the data, was that you're in a little bit of like a dry spell, man. Like you were our first champion of the keeper era, and we should talk about that because I think there are things about it that are still very relevant for UAFBL. I want to come back to that. But but the last several years, it's been up and down, but not even that up and down. Like you've stayed within kind of a tight range in the middle of the pack.
Yeah, it's not
Having
it's not so much down. It's more
No,
just
it's not down.
like the middle.
I mean, yeah, you had a second place finish in 2010-11. You had a 12th place finish in 2011-12. And then you've never been as high or as low as that since then. And so I'm just curious. I mean, in a year, and I really don't want to talk about reform, but in a UAFBL season where we're talking a lot about seesawing, and trying to design our league in a way that will mitigate seesawing. You haven't really been seesawing, so I'm just curious how you think about your sort of the year-to-year play of the Splicers, and whether you've been reluctant at any point to really try to bottom out.
Yeah, I mean, I knew going into last year, I had planned to essentially bottom out last year because I went for it 2 years ago, right? When before the Red Wedding, I had acquired Anthony Davis, and we can talk about that trade later. But I like essentially went for it. I was in like fifth or sixth, and I was going for it, and then I ended up kind of flipping and getting a few assets.
That was the year. That was the year 2 years ago when it was our most competitive year, right? We had six or seven true contenders at the end,
right? And so I was basically gonna bottom out the next year, but then I ended up getting PG and I don't know. I had like some money or slots or whatever I ended up coming in with. And so it didn't really justify completely bottoming out. So then I went like middle again, and that was a little frustrating. And then now I'm in a similar situation where I've never intentionally gone in and just bottomed out. I would, I guess, try to rebuild through competing. I don't know. It hasn't worked out too well for me. Yeah, I don't have.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't have a problem with bottoming out. It's just something it never made sense, I guess.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, I'm looking at last year, and Lusky, I'm curious what your reaction is. I mean, Wall and Teague are good players, but they're not great players. And you got cash and slots for them to set you up for this year.
Yeah, but I was trying. I mean, I was trying obviously to get one of the big assets that were available. So I guess in that way, like I had gone into last year hoping throughout the season to at some point get one of the key assets. Wall didn't end up being enough. He was cheaper, and maybe rightly so at the auction, where it made sense his value. Where I guess he might be a keeper this year. I don't know what happened there, but yeah, it obviously wasn't enough to get one of the big guys.
Right. Yeah. I mean, Lusky, I mean, what do you think about just in terms of Splicer strategy? Do you think it made sense going into last year, coming in with a short stack after making his run, but also then sort of hedging in a way in the Red Wedding 2 years ago, for Haidt not to bottom out? I mean, you of course are the greatest proponent of rebuilding through competing. So in hindsight, looking at where the Splicers were last year, do you think Haidt made the right call or the wrong call?
I mean, hindsight's 2020. I actually I'm looking at it, and I mean, if the Favors thing hadn't had been so bad, I mean, it was really like you took a lot of big swings and misses last year, right? Favors, Dunn, Jabari in particular. I mean, the Jabari injury in particular. And then Dunn not panning out and Favors just being a total bust. That basically killed you. I'm hearing what you're saying. I think that you were kind of held hostage by this Paul George situation, since you knew you were going to have him this year, that year, and the next, and you were like, okay, if I'm going to have him, then maybe I should just try to hedge a little bit, compete, stay middle of the pack, and come out with some assets. And I think that's kind of what you did. Like, you didn't end up getting one of the prime keepers, I don't think, but you're coming in with, a few nice pieces, and your cash position's decent.
Well, hold on. I did get Willie Cauley-Stein.
That's true. Who is amazing. But you traded him for nothing, right?
I traded him for Thon McCare.
Oh, yeah. No, you traded him for Thon. Yeah, you're amazing. So I don't know. It's actually interesting looking at your team and the position you're in, because last year you were coming in with $377 in 3 slots, and in the position that I'm in right now, coming in with a low position, I'm debating how to use my situation, and I'm like, okay, I see what you did. You kind of you got a few veterans that you were hoping would amount to more than what you paid for them. And you took some shots on guys like Dunn and Jabari and Murray, who didn't exactly hit a home run for you. So, the rebuild through competing wasn't necessarily as successful as you hoped it would be.
I'm looking now. I'm looking back at your draft last year, Height, and I had forgotten, but now I recall really liking your draft at the time. And I think part of what I liked about it was that there were some things that struck me as, at the time, and maybe I was wrong then too, but like a little uncharacteristic for you. Like, I was really impressed by your moves for Dunn and Jabari and Jamal Murray. Like, like spending sort of big money for rookies, and taking several shots at them. And for non-UConn rookies at that, struck me as a little more bold than you've been in the past.
Yeah, and they didn't hit. I mean, Murray maybe. Murray maybe.
Yeah. Right. So I mean, tying up $65 on Dunn and Jabari in hindsight sucks, but like, but at the time I was super into it. I think everyone was like, I mean, obviously you had to spend $42 on Jabari. People were super excited about him last year. Dunn, everyone thought was going to be Rookie of the Year. Like that. Those were. And
Favors like nobody really saw that coming. Like, he had been fine. He's only like 25, 26 now this year, I think.
No, that was a sneaky. I think that he was like that was like a sneaky buy by you. That was like one of those ones where like, oh, I thought he was going to go $15 more or $20 more. Like, that was a good buy at the time. So I really liked your draft.
I will say this was another thing that caught my attention when I was looking through your history is I think you've kind of been miscast by me as well as someone who's not really a risk taker. But if you look back, I mean, you drafted Miles Turner for 23. Like that wasn't cheap. You drafted Jabari Parker as a rookie for 36. You took all those shots last year on Dunn and Jabari and Murray. Like you've not shown reluctance to spend on young players, probably more than most managers.
I took KD. I took KD for 50, I think, but he wasn't a keeper that first year.
Yeah, you're talking about keeping Thon Maker for 3 years, which would be bold. I mean, like you've shown more aggression around young players than I think we give you credit for.
Can we talk about Thon right now?
Yes, we need to.
Let's do it.
Height.
What did he do tonight? Hold on. Let me see what he did tonight. Okay, go ahead.
No, I have to see what he did.
I don't think he played.
Okay.
He did not play.
That's probably good. That's probably good for you. I think the more you see him, the more likely it is that you make a bad decision. If the auction were tonight, and you had to make a commitment with your keeper slots, would one of those keeper slots be used on Thon?
If I had to make a decision tonight, I mean, the good news is that I don't have to make a decision tonight.
I understand that's the case, but this is a hypothetical.
The acquisition of Thon.
Indulge me.
The acquisition of Thon was knowing that it would give me the option come draft night that if I wanted to keep him, I could.
Yes,
and that I wouldn't have to worry about bidding on him.
Okay, so if tonight were the draft, if tonight were the auction, would you use one of the slots?
I don't know. I don't know. I couldn't answer that question.
Okay. I mean, my view on this is that it's 3 or bust. I mean, doing anything, and 3 obviously has risks and rewards if it hits, but using a slot on somebody like Thon for anything less than 3 years to me just seems crazy. I don't know whether you have a different view and are considering something shorter term.
No, it would be 3. It would be 3 or bust. Yeah. It would be 3. There's no plastic vaginas.
No plastic vaginas. Good.
I think if you keep Thon for 3 years, though, you have to get a shirt made or something.
A Thon shirt?
Yeah, like
before the auction. You need to
of course. It's like you have to unveil the jersey. Something.
Unzip your hoodie, and reveal your Thon 3-year keeper shirt.
Yeah, well, it could even be like just like a sly reference, because you remember that article last year that like everyone went crazy over, where Thon was being referred to as like a golden unicorn or something. So you could get like a unicorn shirt that we all get. but I think you need to commemorate it if you go 3 on him.
Let's think about
Right?
it. I'll think about it.
What do you think?
Yeah, I'll think about it.
So what I will say about the Thon
Or you could,
thing
or you could just
was
get like or you could just get like a shirt that has like a giant flag of South Sudan.
so what I'll say about the Thon thing was that like so I had just been going along all summer thinking like, oh, Thon's one of those like cute players on Gabe's team that he pretends he's going to keep all 8 of them or whatever, and he's of course he's not. Um, and then Hyde made the move and started talking about keeping him multiple years, and I was like, huh? And I went and I did go into so Thon Maker is one of those players like you do not want to look at his averages or even his like month by month splits. That's not a good idea. But what is actually kind of interesting is if you just go to his game log, he's one of those guys that if you find the games in his game log, you're like, damn, this guy puts up 20 points now and again. This guy gets you 4 blocks now and again. Like this guy has good percentages. You're like, if he does that with any consistency, then it's a no-brainer keeper, right?
Right. And the way, this league goes is those huge assets are so valuable that it may make sense. Like
Right. So
before he becomes the asset is when it makes sense, right? If he gets
If
drafted,
not, you just pass him around like Nikola Mirotic's contract, and
exactly.
it's no big deal.
So that's the question. That's the question. Is there's a couple questions about it. One is if Height keeps on for 3 years, would that be the most speculative?
I kept
most
Anthony
aggressive-
Randolph. I would vote for Anthony Randolph's 3-year keep.
Oh, yeah, that's another one. See, the height aggression for young guys is strong.
It's true. You have to shake this reputation of being a conservative manager. You take some strokes. But on the Anthony Randolph, wasn't he like he had played a season or two at that point and probably had a lot more like starts and minutes than Thon has at this point.
Yeah, but he hadn't. I mean, we can go back and look at his stats. Like he didn't have the stats to warrant the keep. I think it was more the hype.
Well, Thon doesn't really either. I mean, Thon doesn't really have the stats either.
He definitely doesn't, unless you look at per 36.
The thing with Thon is like you kind of feel like he's going to get you 2 blocks in his sleep, and because of block scarcity, like $30 doesn't seem like it's ever going to be that far out of reach, right?
Do we remember?
As long as he actually plays.
While I'm looking up the Anthony Randolph history, Lexi, can you think of other, like especially aggressive, speculative, long-term keeps in our league?
Not as aggressive. I mean, the Mirotic one comes to mind because it's personal to me. Not near. No, I can't think of anything as aggressive as Anthony Randolph. I think Randolph would actually be far more aggressive than this Thon thing.
So first of all, you only kept Randolph for 2 years.
Well, I cut him, right? Oh no, you
right, that's right. So he was okay. So, oh no, you kept him for 3 years. You're right, and then cut him. So you kept him in our. Hold on, I want to look at his stats from when you cut him. So you kept him at the 2009 draft. So I'm just going to pull up his 2008-2009 stats and see what you were keying off of. So, okay, so it was after his rookie year. He started in 22 games. He scored 8 points for 6 rebounds, less than a steal. Yeah, he hadn't done shit.
In 18 minutes. It was 18 minutes, right?
Yeah, Are you looking at the same? Do you have this in minutes memory, or are you looking at the same?
No, I'm looking at stats.
And the thing that's so amazing about that one relative to even Thon is like, one, I don't even think Monster was around during those days, right? If you think about guys now like Mirotic or Jokic, like there's hype coming in because some of these experts have pegged them as like statistical superstars for fantasy purposes. But like in the case of Anthony Randolph, like he was intriguing and whatnot, but I'm fairly confident that like Monster wasn't around that at that time projecting that Anthony Randolph was going to be a beast.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And like, I mean, I think also just we have evolved and we're so much more savvy now about researching these guys. Like Thon Maker, there's these articles and mixtapes and whatnot that get us so, hyped up about players and their potential. And I don't feel like I was ever really doing that for Anthony Randolph. Maybe I was just out of the Anthony Randolph loop.
Yeah. Thon also has some other things going for him that like, signal like similarities with other great UAFBL keepers. Like just the position that he plays, the game that he plays, the fact that he's international.
He's on
Giannis
the
being
same
on
team
his
as
team.
Giannis.
Yeah.
Right, and exactly, and he's in Milwaukee. Just like it touches a lot of it sort of sounds a lot of bells, like Giannis, Porzingis, Embiid. Like there's sort of elements of all of those guys in it, and so you can see it, and so Hike that's helpful and makes us all sort of drool over him. And then I think it is more speculative than Randolph. Just like Randolph was starting games. I mean, how many games did Thon start last year?
Probably 20,
Did he?
probably ish, right?
How you
More
know
than you
offhand?
think, I
I
think.
don't know that.
I'm looking it up. Thon started in. Oh yeah, 34 games. Um,
9 minutes a game, 10 minutes a game.
that's so weird. So anyway, but like right. But the risks at and it's 10, 20, 30, right?
10, 20, 30, yeah.
Yeah. So right. So the risks are low. The reward is very high. Yeah. I mean, I'm talking myself into it for you. Um, I guess the trouble with it, and I'm struggling with this myself, is when you make a long-term deal, even 10, 20, 30, you just don't want to be like, we say that you can unload these things and you can, but you don't want to be struggling with liabilities. It's such a thin margin for error in UAFBL that it's very difficult to compete when you're sort of giving away money or having to pay to get off of contracts or whatever.
Yeah, but I feel like you
Um,
can move it. Like you can move him with another asset, right? If somebody's competing, they're going to take on the contract in order to take on whoever else,
no,
right?
right, but if you're the one who's competing, right? If it turns out to be a bust in next year, like let's say this isn't your year, let's say next year is your year, and you're trying to compete, and you've got a $20 thing on your books for a guy who still can't score more than like 4 points a game, or get whatever, get stats on a consistent basis, then it's still a liability. So yeah, I think there's some risk, but it's definitely tasty. Hey, what do you think of your own reputation within UAFBL as a manager?
What do I think of my reputation? I have no idea. What is my
Do you do
reputation as a
you do
manager?
you do you sense like so? I mean, Lusky and I are both observing that you have a reputation as a more conservative manager, and that it might be an unfounded reputation.
Am I in like the T Mac
Do,
category?
No,
do you
no,
think of yourself?
no.
Do you think of yourself in the two man category?
No. No, but
How
I
would
do
you
think
how?
like, I understand where he's coming from with a lot of his picks, shall I say? Like just going after value and like seeing at the draft where there's value and kind of pouncing on it. Um, I'm never the one to come in and like I said, like have certain guys that I go after.
Yeah. Do you think that the question for either of you? Do you think that like the finding value in mostly veteran players is basically out of vogue in UAFBL? I keep, especially this year, and Leslie, you and I have talked about this a little bit on Slack. I keep coming back to um, all of these players who are veterans who all of us have had on our teams multiple times. They're all very familiar. Some of them are a new team, some of them have new roles, but we all kind of know what they're going to be. Nobody really talks about them coming into the auction. I mean, some people have them on their sheets, like, oh, those stats, work for me. That'd be a great, second point guard for me, or that'd be a great second center for me, or whatever. Um, but like it feels like there is sort of a class of, I don't know, third tier fantasy players who, frankly, should be like the fifth, sixth, seventh best guy on people's teams. That I have a sense are going to be really undervalued this year because there is so much speculation. Excuse me, and the quote unquote T-Max school of just finding those guys when they slip. Like there's fewer and fewer managers who are practicing that. Do you sense that happening in the league, or am I imagining things?
No, I think it is. I mean, I think that's why T Mac did so well last year, right? He was in the hunt. He didn't have any assets to trade to essentially
Right.
because of
And
his strategy.
that's the risk.
If you go all one way, then yeah, I think. But I do think anybody who's competing this year, it makes sense to target a few of those guys. Like you need some of the, you know, legit starters for like $20 that are going to put up stats and be a good value.
Right. Right. Lusky, do you sense that? Do you sense that trend like flipping the other way at all? Like, is it going to become popular again in UFBL to just like be the guy who smartly drafts George Hill for $19 when everybody else overlooks him?
I don't see it. I mean, I think those guys always, they're always like, it's like, even if you're in a rebuilding period, you're like, well, why wouldn't I bid 19 on George Hill? But,
Well, so let me just say, I'm in a rebuilding period, and I am looking at like I keep like running my tongue over that tooth. Like I keep looking at that class of players and think, I don't have a tall stack. I don't want to be in the cellar necessarily. I have a lot of upsidey guys who I'm going to be pursuing, of course, but like I will, I'd like to have players. I'd like to have guys who I can flip and who I know will have value to teams. And like George Hill should be on a competing roster, can be on a competing roster. He's good enough to be. And I just like what for $19? Like, why not? I'm gonna spend $19 on a lot worse than George Hill. So like, why is it a bad idea?
it's not a bad idea. The issue is that guys like that, I feel like they're always going to go at a bargain because it's going to be the teams in competition, which seems to be fewer and fewer every year, which is kind of shocking to say. But the teams that feel like they're in the mix are going to be the only ones bidding on a player like that. And they're just trying to kind of fill holes, right? They're trying to fill out the back end of their roster. And there's no one bidding those guys up because those of us on the bottom who are trying to seek out deals that are going to materialize into these really valuable assets. Like, what do we want to do with George Hill, right? But like younger players on the other hand, you feel like, well, shoot, this guy could be the next Giannis, right? This guy could be, and it's very rare. It's just so rare that you get a veteran that materializes into like a 3-year keeper, right? Westbrook was an anomaly, and that was because he was coming off injury. But
look at the Splicers draft last year. Like Dunn, like Chris Dunn for $23 versus George Hill for $23. Like Height would have done much better to have George Hill for $23 last year.
Yeah, but that wasn't what he was playing for.
No, I know, but like the guys you're talking about you're just placing a lot of you're placing a lot of bets on very long odds.
Yeah,
and everybody's doing it right now. Is my point.
Right.
So why doesn't it mean that there's shouldn't that create a little bit of arbitrage, right?
It should, but then the dynamic of our league right now, and this is again kind of dipping a toe into the reform discussion, but like the nature of our league right now is that you feel like to win, you have to place and hit on those big bets, right? It's like, who cares if winning George Hill takes me from a 10th place finish to a 6th place finish?
Well, there's Emmer Care to consider.
Yeah.
If you can flip George Hill for $5 during the arms race, which is a reasonable thing to happen, and your Chris Dunns are just going to wither on the vine, you'd rather have those $5, and those $5 might help facilitate a deal next offseason to get somebody like Thon, who you're going to keep for 3 years or whatever. Like,
yeah, I mean, I would still say the expected value of like if Chris Dunn hit right is still much higher there because of the limited upside of the George Hill at $19. Right, George Hill's safe. It's worth that $5. I know I'm going to get it, but the other side is the small chance that the big asset hits.
Where I thought you were going was actually, I think that the George Hill for 19 discussion is a little bit trickier because there's always value in guys that are that cheap. But my question is like even a kind of a tier above that. So like, the Jeff Teagues of the world, right? The guy, or even as high as like Al Horford, right? Like I feel like those are the guys that end up being extreme bargains in our league. They're rarely going to turn into keepers, but they end up being real value picks. And because no one who's really focused on getting those home run keepers is going to be in bidding on those guys, and they're solely there to fit a need, and you can get them at a decent price.
Yeah, I agree. I just in having conversations with people on this year's draft, it's like everyone's focused on what's going to happen in like the $100 plus range, like which am I going to be in on a star? Who's going to who's going to be bidding on the stars? How much are they going to go for? and then it just drops to which $18 guy am I gonna get? Which sleepers do I like? And nobody cares about all those players. And so we talked on the last
It
pod
goes from like
before.
Millsap to Kyle Kuzma.
Exactly, it does. That's right. Nobody cares about anybody in between. But like you're right, Les. Like those hitting on those players, like the right veteran players, makes a huge difference, and it's what swings. It's really what swings championships, I think, because the teams who are in contention are the teams who have elite players. Like, Emmer has elite keepers, Gabe has elite keepers, Weeg has elite keepers, Phil has one or more elite keeper. We know who's going to be in contention. We know who has these elite keepers. The thing that's going to really differentiate them from one another is like who finds the right, top 60 guy for $25. Like I was so envious of you last year for hitting on Eric Gordon, and Eric Gordon is not like, I mean, he wasn't like a superstar, but
He was ranked
what
like
you paid for
120th on the year or something.
Was he at the end?
Yeah, I think so. He fell off after the Lou Will deal.
I was just, for the first half of the season, then I was just like total, and I was also just envious because I picked the wrong guy for threes. But getting those guys right in the year I won, I paid like $8 for Andrei Kirilenko, and he was a top 50 player or something. Like that stuff always feels like it's more important than like which $125 guy you have. So yeah, I think it's a very interesting dynamic. I think the league. Height, tell me if you sense this, that like the league used to. The chatter coming into the draft used to be much more about Paul Millsap and much less about Kyle Kuzma.
Yes, but I mean, I think it's also because we've gotten much more away from the anybody can win any given year towards there's only a few people who can win, right? And so as we've like pendulum swung in that direction, I think that's kind of caused that shift that you're sensing.
One other thing I wanted to talk about with the Splicer history. There's a few things actually we still need to cover. One is, talk about your red wedding experience, because it really, now red wedding is this like loaded term in UFBL. You were involved in the first red wedding. Talk about your thought process, how you got from being a buyer to a seller in the course of like 3 weeks or something.
Yeah, I mean, that year I came in, it was the last year of the Harden deal. I got Steph for like 196 or something crazy like that. And so that year I was definitely going for it, right? My bench was pretty thin, as can be expected, and I didn't end up hitting on enough of those guys. But I was still in it enough to make a deal for AD, essentially. I think I got AD and maybe some other trash in that deal. Like, I got Turner, hit on Turner, but Turner was hurt like most of that year. So I wasn't really sure what Turner was at that point. He had only played, I want to say, a few weeks at the time when I had traded him. He had a couple of those big games where he was like hitting threes and blocks and rebounds and stuff. But it wasn't like a for sure, like, oh, this is a 3-year keeper, this is a huge asset guy. I was basically, coupled him with a few other like squinters, Jordan Clarkson.
It was all at the time. It was all flyers, although
it was all flyers.
Yeah. Although several of them turned out to be keepers, including D'Angelo Russell.
Right, Russell. I think I had kept, or was that his rookie year? Maybe that was his rookie year. But yeah, Turner obviously hit, but I was able to get AD in that deal, and I think I gave up a bunch of cash as well. And then so I had like 3 of the top 10 players. AD was in one of his like, possibility to be shut down at any point. And I think I only had him for like 2 weeks and realized I was in like 5th or 6th at the time. It was, like you said, it was like one of the more competitive years with a bunch of people in the hunt. And anyway, I looked at it, like there was no way, even if AD was healthy the rest of the year, that I was going to even move like up to 5th. Like it just wasn't, I didn't see any way statistically for that to happen. And Peskin was obviously there with PG. He had managed to hold out trading PG throughout all of it. And so it was kind of like a natural fit, so to speak, of basically my team for, at least those 3 guys for PG. And then, AD went down like right after I traded, or they shut AD down right after I traded. Obviously, it was still a good deal for Peskin.
Right. He got Curry and Harden.
So I just have a quick question about that year, because I'm fascinated about that year too, because Curry for you last year, or I guess it's 2 years ago now, had the best fantasy season ever, right?
Yeah.
And so what I'm trying to remember is earlier on in the year when he just went on this mission and started killing everybody. Um, was it like a two-man race between you and Peskin? Were you ahead at one point and then the others kind of caught up? Like what materialized to kind of mire you down in fifth? Because I kind of recall your team being better than that because of Curry.
I definitely started off higher. I had more games played. Remember we started that season like a weekend or so.
Oh yeah.
And so I went on the like early on trying to make up those games. A bunch of teams decided to wait it out, and then that ended up so my like being at the top was somewhat inflated, I think, because of like poor starts by people that probably shouldn't have been starting that early on.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at your auction from that year, and it just looks like you would have had depth issues early on.
I did.
Yeah.
I mean, you had Curry and Harden. It's to be
expected.
Expected.
Curry and Harden, yeah, it was fun. I mean, Curry, it was pretty enjoyable.
And was that, now this was a couple years after Emmer had tried the like LeBron Durant thing, right?
I don't remember him. Yeah.
Yeah, that was he did that the year that I won. So that was 2012, 2013.
Okay, yeah, because I feel like that was a trend. Is like try and get like the two of the best possible players and pair them and see what you can make it.
Yeah, I mean, I still had savings with Harden though, at least, so it wasn't like just going out and spending 300. I guess it was close.
It was actually. It was 196 and 92. It was 196 and 92.
Yeah, actually, I was looking at it. The 196 you spent on Curry, I'm pretty sure ties Harden last year with the most ever spent on a player in UAFBL.
Lusky, do you think this is the year that we get to a $200 player?
I don't know. I don't see
only
it.
One, right?
What's that?
There's only one, right? Durant's the only one who would be up there, right?
Harden.
Or Harden or Anthony Davis.
I don't see it. I mean, I think that maybe Harden or Durant breaks 190, and I think that the other two probably fall in the 180s. But I don't see the 200 thing happening. I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong.
It's just pure mental threshold, right? Like, there's no reason why these bids keep topping out at 196.
Well, it's funny you say that because like I always get a kick when I'm reviewing. Actually, so I should tell you, Height, since you're with us, probably my favorite tab on that whole spreadsheet, the franchise record, is the historical draft price data. Just having it all in one place is fabulous. And what I get a kick out of is seeing the number of players that go for $99 exactly.
Because it's like disproportionate.
Well, no, it's not disproportionate, but I feel like there's one or two every year because it's like you can just envision us saying like, oh, I have to hear it, and then you don't hear it.
What do you think? Speaking of that, like, what do you think what are like the hidden inefficiencies of our auction? Do you think that like it makes a ton of sense every time things start to slow down at 49 and at 74 and at 99 to always be the guy who crosses the threshold? That these guys are actually these guys are actually worth more, but there's just this fear of saying these round numbers.
I definitely don't have a fear of saying round numbers.
Where I thought you were going, Horn, where I thought you were going was like, in terms of the inefficiencies, what I've been studying is like, when are are there better rounds to call a player who I want versus a player that I don't want?
Oh yeah, that's tricky business.
It really is. And I think the reason it's hard to pinpoint is just because of the randomness of who's calling who. Like there's not, some years round 2 is where all the bargains are, and some years it's round 1, and some years it's round 6. And it's like, so there's really no there's no predictability around it.
So the conventional wisdom in UAFBL is that we're all skittish early on. And height, I think we've only been tracking the order in which the players are called for the last like 2 or 3 years. Is that
Yeah,
right?
but people fuck with the sheet, and so I don't know that has preserved. Like the sheet originally does have that order, but then I've noticed some people will go in and like sort it or something, and then that messes things up.
That should be why can't that be a locked page?
It can be a locked page. It just means that I'm the one who has to do the whole thing.
Yeah, well, so I was looking at this today. Actually, I'm not sure. Was Myers Leonard really the first player called?
Yes, I think he was. He's been at the top of that list for at least a year. I mean,
yeah, that
list for as long as I've been looking at it.
That list looks right.
So according to last year on this subject, last year I think the first round was actually kind of hot and heavy, right? We had the double top of Chris Paul. We had the double top.
Let's go through it. I think that's a good thing to do. Why don't we go through the first round of last year?
Okay, Myers Leonard.
I need to pull up the sheet.
Who was that? Was that Peskin?
It was a $0 call. Right. I guess he called it. He owned
himself,
him, and yeah,
right, just to get rid of it, to get it off his books.
Yeah.
That was part of the Red Wedding. I unloaded. He had to take Myers Leonard, didn't I?
There's more data that would be really nice to have. Height. It would be nice to know who nominated the player.
You're kidding me. You're killing me.
I'm just saying it would be nice. It would be nice if we had that.
You can track it. Feel free. I'll open the sheet up to you, and you can add who nominated the player.
It would also be nice.
You should be able to figure it out too. If the oh, never mind, because
it's seeding. It's not. It's seeding. Only the first is based on the previous year's results. Yeah. While we're on the subject of things that would be nice data that would be nice to have, besides accurate data on Andre Drummond's three-point shooting, it would be nice to have, and I think this is basically impossible, but I'm just putting it out there. It would be nice to have a record of every bid placed on a particular player.
So you want like the eBay bid history?
Yeah, exactly. So you don't just see that Anthony Davis went for 181, but you see like what the opening bid was, who made it, and then
so we need like Siri to record our draft then, basically, and transcribe.
That's a great idea.
Or we get everyone gets like a button. Or get like some like Bluetooth system so that everybody can just like place their bids digitally and it's recorded rather than orally.
We'll see if we can build that into the app that he wants to build.
Very helpful. So Anthony Davis was the second called. Gabe won him for 100. Did Gabe flip him immediately to?
Yeah.
No.
Emmer won him.
Emmer won him and flipped him for Porzingis.
Yeah.
So the sheet's actually inaccurate.
Well,
yeah. I don't know.
Before the end of the draft, this is the team that they were on.
Why?
This is all during draft.
Yeah, because like it says that I won. It says that Jones won Nerlens, which I can assure you he did not.
and will not again this year.
And will not again.
Anthony Davis was big. Second player called, and then it was three kind of boring middling players: DeAndre, Redick, and.
But even DeAndre went for a nice chunk last year.
DeAndre went for what he goes for. I mean, isn't that sort of just what he goes for?
I don't know. I thought he went high enough. $63.
Yeah, but he's not.
I don't think he's going 63 this year.
No, I think he'll go for less.
Yeah. Jonas Valanciunas double top, $65.
Double topped. Yes. What are the? Well, yeah. And then we you're right. Then we had a couple $100 guys, and none of these. I mean, Cousins was probably a little cheaper than he might have.
Yeah, Cousins was the steal of this round.
And everybody, and I think that's the only evidence of any kind of hesitancy to spend money.
Yeah, I would say like the first few years there might have been hesitancy in that first round, and like in other auction drafts, that you definitely notice that. But for this, I think we're all pretty ready to come in with our checkbook, so to speak.
Wait, so here's the interesting thing here. I'm looking at so Harden was topped by Beer. I'm pretty sure that Bookbinder with his like huge stack of cash was the one who got topped. Isn't that right?
No, when he got topped, I don't know.
Because I'm trying to. I mean, we should invite him on to talk about this. But I wonder if his plan was because he was.
I don't want to.
Okay,
I don't want to Bookbinder on.
I definitely got topped like 4 times, I think. But it was like obvious tops. Like Chris Paul was going for like 120 or something,
You got topped 4
It was
times.
some crazy number
Oh
like
yeah,
that.
you kept getting topped. I was sitting next to you.
Because it was like the value. Like there was so much value, and then you're like, well, this guy's probably going to be topped, and then they were.
Did you feel, or do you feel coming into this year like sort of snake bitten by that? Like, I remember when we were talking about toppers last year on this podcast with Gabe, he said something about like, just like the looming threat of the topper, like just sort of casting a
No, I mean,
cloud over.
I think it was so obvious. Like I said, like Chris Paul was at like one. I think it was like 120, right? And it was clear that
So
there
like
was
when
at
you were
least
making
one.
when you were making those bids, you were just like waiting to hear somebody call it
Yeah,
out.
yeah. And then I think because we had what two double tops, and then a couple more. Like there was only 6 or 7 toppers left, right? Um, even going into like day 2. So it wasn't. I don't know. I definitely didn't feel like too too much like too
Too
intense.
ominous. Too ominous.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you Hype, do you have any reservations about toppers for UFBL?
Have any reservations? No, it was fun. I mean, do you think there were any like major steals because of toppers?
Um, Not really.
I
Not
don't
really.
remember
Les,
any.
what do you think?
I think the shrewdest use of toppers was for guys like Marc Gasol.
Yeah, the Marcus
You
All buy
know,
was nice.
when you go for a guy that you kind of know is going to be humdrum, and if you take yourself out of the bidding on him, that you're going to get him at a nice price. I think that's pretty clever.
Um, yeah, I don't think it like fundamentally changed anything. It is just weird. Um, it is weird when you are. I mean, this is what makes it fun. Just you're trying to plan your auction, and a lot of the best guys are taken are because they're kept, and you know that like you might not get any of them because of toppers. It's really challenging. Um, Lusk, what's the is there any like are you prepared to say who you're using your topper on in WCL this weekend?
We don't have toppers. We outlawed them.
Oh, you outlawed them. I don't think I realized that.
Yeah, they're
When did
gone
that
for
happen?
good. There was so the general sense, and I'm curious if we ever get to this point because there's a lot of topper fanfare going on right now. But there was something about the dynamic of the WCL draft last year that it just felt like there were no good players on the board. Because like it was a year where like there were a lot of the best players were being kept, and then all of the other good players ended up getting topped, and you just felt like the draft was kind of lame because like the rest of the pool was kind of lame, you know.
That's it. I mean that echoes to some extent what we're talking about this year, which is that like after the Durant fireworks and after the Harden fireworks and after the Anthony Davis fireworks,
Yeah, and if those
you
guys all
know,
get topped, then it yeah,
then
it
we're
gets a
right.
lot less interesting.
Then we're into like the Millsap Lowry
Lowry,
tier,
yeah.
and no, that's not fun. I'm not flying to Texas to fucking bid on Paul Millsap.
Yes, you are. Um,
Um,
before we get off this, I want to I want to just ask Height. So going into this year, I mean, what is your team identity heading in? Right, you're tied for the second biggest cash position. You've got 4 keeper slots. As I said, I view you as a leader after the huge wall coup that you landed.
I sent some subtweet in there, but okay.
No, I love the Splicers this year. What's the plan?
I mean, they're we'll see, I guess is the answer to that. Yeah, I do have 4 slots. I got 3 people under contract. So George on his last year, which could be interesting.
oh, and you've got Zachy Love.
Yeah. I mean, he's out till for a while, but I do have
But
him for
he could
another
be a
year.
big. I mean, he could be a home run for you if he comes back and dominates on that terrible team.
Yeah, I lost the bet to you because he was in the top 50 when he went down, and then
Oh yeah, is that on the sheet yet?
I think so.
Oh,
Yeah,
better
remind
be.
me, I'll add that. And I think he was like we had a minimum games played, and he was like 4 games over the minimum. Harry Barnes, which is not exciting at 22, but he'll be fine value.
Why? How is that
Um,
not exciting? I mean, right? It's not Giannis, but like that's a
it's
nice
nice.
player.
It's nice. Yeah, he'll play. He'll get stats. There's not much upside. You kind of know what he is at this point. And then yeah,
Are you
crap.
worried about George on OKC?
We'll just see like what the usage is and how they're gonna play there. Obviously, like something's got to give. Not worried. I think he'll be fine.
Durant was pretty good when he played there.
Yeah, he turned out to be not too bad.
Yeah,
I
but
can't
that's
imagine Westbrook doing more of what he did last year.
more of just doing everything
Yeah,
and yeah. Well,
we'll see.
um, it's weird, man. Like I think people are a little like in the how long has it been since Carmelo got traded? Like, is it 2 weeks yet?
Just about.
I feel like the conventional wisdom on the like dynamic of that team has like gone full circle like in just 2 weeks. Initially, it was like a lot of the pieces don't really fit together. There's going to be a lot of ISO, and then like recently, people are starting to like squint at it and make out like, oh no, like Paul George is such a interchangeable, dynamic, flexible kind of player. He'll sort of just find his way. And actually, like Carmelo's game in some ways, merges really well with Westbrook's. And I think I'm leaning. I think I might have been the reverse. I might have started a bit more optimistic. I'm a little concerned, not about Paul George's stats, because I think most of what he does best, he can do there, basically regardless of what else happens. But like overall for that team, I just don't see, I just don't see how they can be an elite team in the Western Conference. We don't
I
need to get
would.
into
I
that.
mean, I would. Yeah, I would think it would be more of like how they were with KD, right?
They were
In terms
pretty
of
good with
like their
KD.
quality.
They
Well,
made the
they were
finals.
pretty close to elite with KD. Um, but anyway, go. I didn't mean to go down an OKC rabbit hole. So please go on. Oh, you've got Jamal Murray. You're not going to keep Jamal Murray?
And then yeah, so sorry. So then I have one slot unaccounted for, and then there's Jamal Murray, there's Thon, there's Alan Crabb. So there are options, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, one thing to think about. Um, I mean, Jamal
There's
Murray.
Paul
Right.
Zipser.
It would be nice if
Zipser
Jamal. It would be
starting.
nice if Jamal. It would be nice if Jamal Murray wasn't $20 to keep.
It would be nice, yeah. If he got
Um,
bid on this year, he would be a lot more to keep next year.
yeah. Um, Lusky, what would you do if you were the Splicers with Thon?
I don't know. I mean, I ever since he made that move, I've kind of been convincing myself into it, but uh, I don't know.
Zipser for three.
No, no.
Um,
I kind of like the bet on Thon. Just given the articles and the Bucks thing and everything we just talked about with him, there's just enough allure there, and the fact that he was $0 last year, right?
yeah.
Yep.
So like, yeah, why not? Swing for the fences.
So I just want to say one other thing. I want to talk a little bit about sort of auction preview, and we want to talk about a couple of the teams besides the Splicers. But before we move on from the Splicer history trajectory, and we've touched on a little bit of this, but so I think so. One point I think is that height you've been a much more aggressive, ambitious manager over the years than your reputation might suggest. And then second, and then this may be consistent with that, you've been part of, I think, several important advances or sort of trends in UAFBL. One of which, of course, is the red wedding. I mean, you basically invented the red wedding. I don't think we've ever had, at least at that level, somebody who became a buyer and then a seller, with those kinds of stakes, with that kind of value ever before. And that has, I mean, it made perfect sense for you at the time, and now it has become this like the third rail of UFBL politics. So that's interesting to me. And then the other thing is that first championship of yours, which was a Dwight strategy championship, right? And like the Dwight strategy was, I would say, one of the most important forces in UFBL for almost a decade. I think it's on its way sort of out of fashion, not completely. I think it's still viable to a certain extent and under the right circumstances. But that was sort of at the vanguard of UFBL like strategy for a good long time. And I think there might have been one or two others I was going to note as well. But like those are two very important like developments in UFBL. So I think I just wanted to note that.
Thank you, I guess. Why do you think that the Dwight strategy is out of favor?
Well, out of favors.
out of favors?
Um, well, I mean, I tried it last year and failed, and then several people who were considering it this year basically came to me and said, "You tried it last year and failed. I don't think it's viable." Um,
Yeah, I mean
and
the interesting
and
thing
the
is
reason,
if that happens, then all of a sudden it will be viable, right? If there's one guy doing it and he can get all those guys cheap, then that makes all the difference in the world, right?
yeah, I mean, I was only really competing against, I mean, Jones last year for some of these guys, although he had a slightly different strategy, so his willingness to go up to a certain level on some of them was more limited than mine. No, I mean, I think that's not really the issue. The issue is that, and Emmer has made this point in support of his reform movement, that in the era of UAFBL in which red weddings are a fact of life, if we assume that red weddings are going to continue to happen, or at a minimum, we assume that like hyper consolidation of talent during the arms race will continue to happen, then it's basically impossible to not punt turnovers if you're a contender. And if you're punting turnovers, right, because you're going to end up getting your Hardens and your Walls and your whoever, and you're gonna end up just sinking to the bottom, especially while all of the sellers give up their ball handlers and their high usage players and end up gaining points in turnovers. So if you're going to punt turnovers, or you're going to be towards the bottom in turnovers, can you also be towards the bottom in free throw percentage? And can you basically punt two categories? I mean that's if you look at the difference between Lusky's team last year and my team last year, that basically, I mean, that describes a lot of it. I couldn't I think I was third from the bottom in free throw and third from the bottom in turnovers or something like that, and that's not viable. The Dirty Dogs were, I think, at the bottom of turnovers and competitive across the board everywhere else. And a big reason why they were competitive across the board everywhere else is because they benefited from all of those other factors, all of those other sort of facts of life in UFBL now. So,
And
so that
ultimately, ultimately winning free throw won me the league.
right. So if all of that's true, then it doesn't matter whether you get DeAndre for 63 or 33. If you're punting free throw with DeAndre, you're nowhere at the end. So that's one side of it. I think the other side of it is, look, we've had 2 years in which there have been red wedding-ish type deals. I don't think that's necessarily a trend yet. I think every year in UFBL is idiosyncratic and different from the last. I mean, we went from a year where we had 6 or 7 contending teams to a year where we had like 3 contending teams. I think it will continue to vary from year to year. I think some of these other things that are happening, like the complete disinterest in like middle tier players, if that is a trend, in fact, I think that will change the way that like players are distributed across teams. It will change the viability of certain types of trades during the arms race for contenders. And so I just don't know that like looking at the particular dynamics of last year's race tells you everything you need to know about the punt free throw strategy. I also think it's true that if you do the punt free throw strategy, you are almost guaranteed to be in the mix in February, March, and that's like really all you can ask for is just to, like, get into the mix. I think a soft punt of free throws is viable, where you can maybe engage in a little bit of free throw like recovery down the stretch by getting somebody like Harden or whatever. And I think any strategy that like guarantees that you're in the top 3 or 4, like when the arms race begins, is still a viable strategy. And then at that point, it just becomes a matter of making a couple of good moves and catching a little luck. Height, what's your reaction to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it still could be a viable strategy given the right circumstances, right? You still need to get those guys at discount, and you still need to hit on some of the assets that you can then flip at the deadline. But I wouldn't
Yeah,
be against it, right? If I don't need to like redo my whole roster to support it, but if it made sense, like I wouldn't be against going for it.
yeah. Um, Lusk, what do you think? Do you think it's? I mean, do you sense that it's falling out of fashion, or do you think it's still? I know people are talking about it. I think people should be, especially the people who are talking about it, who have the players for it right now. I think it makes sense for the reasons I just said. But do you think that it's less shiny than it used to be in UFBL?
Yeah, it's certainly less shiny. The only thing I would say is I think it's easier to do the soft punt thing that you talked about than it had been back in the early days, right? Like it felt like before if you drafted Dwight, just because the amount of times that he would go to the line, that you were inevitably going to end up last in free throw. And nobody ever was going to want Dwight from you because they were going to end up last in free throw. And he was hard to trade. So now it's a little bit different just because I feel like there's so many good players like Gobert and Whiteside that are bad at free throw, and they are movable pieces. And so I think something like what Bookbinder did last year could work, right? I mean, it's unfortunate that the Durant injury happened when it did because, Scott was very much in the mix. And I think what he did brilliantly is manage his percentages in such a way that like he could have, I think he saw himself climbing up to the top half of free throw, despite starting the year with Whiteside and acquiring Gobert. And he was just very fluid in terms of how he was going to compensate for percentages along the way.
Yeah, I think as long as we remain a league in which trading is relatively easy, and that is a league that I want to preserve. I think that kind of fluidity, being able to adjust course over the course of the season, recognizing that the team that you draft at the auction is not going to necessarily bear a lot of resemblance to the team that you end with, but recognizing that means that you can make adjustments in terms of your sort of category by category positioning over the course of the season and the course of the arms race, like that to me is what's fashionable in UFPL now. That kind of flexibility. So I'm curious to see how teams sort of position themselves for that at the auction next week. We were going a little longer than I had hoped, but let's talk about the auction. We've got an auction coming up a week. Heidi,
a week from today, there will be managers in Austin eating Tex-Mex.
I will be one of those managers.
Yes, the Splicers will be in Austin
2 years in a row.
Amazing. Love it.
Are you and you'll be going for the Listeria vanilla?
I will not be partaking in the Listeria.
I don't think we're
the barbecue Trail of Tears.
Wait, what? Not in the Are you like anti-meat or something?
No, I will be in the barbecue Trail of Tears.
Okay.
I will not be in on the Listeria.
Yeah, we're not going to make Listeria. It's never in the cards just based on timing.
Apparently, we're going to see a show in Austin though.
Yeah, we're gonna go see. Apparently, these guys are like some of the best guitarists in the world. So we'll check it out. If we like it, we'll stay. If not, we'll go and see what else is going on
and watch like preseason basketball.
Yeah.
So let's just do a little bit of previewing. We haven't like done a sort of dedicated preview pod. I think we each were going to talk about one or two contending teams and just give, for those who may be listening to this in doing their own prep and getting ready for the auction themselves, just do a little bit of an overview of sort of where the managers stand and what why they stand out as a contender and what they ought to be thinking about going into the auction. Les, why don't you start with one of yours?
Okay, so I'll start with the Split Fiddles. So the Fiddles are interesting to me because they already have, two top 10 or top 15 players. Certainly, Towns is a top 10 guy and Butler is top 10, maybe top 15, depending on your ranking. But they've got those two guys under contract and Towns has another year and they're all at great prices, right? So I think he's in the conversation, right? I think he's in the conversation more than maybe people realize. I do think that it was unfortunate the trade that took place earlier this summer. So what was the deal again? He traded Willie Hernan Gomez and a slot and some cash maybe for Isaiah Thomas and Nurkic. Is that right?
But yeah, that was the deal.
Yeah, and I just think that really backfired just mainly because Thomas's injury, right? Like Thomas is no longer a keeper anymore. I can't.
Let's talk about all that for a sec. So first of all, Hernan Gomez is not a keeper, I don't think.
No, not certainly not after the Cantor trade.
and let's say the slot was worth whatever, $12 or whatever. Like first of all, Isaiah Thomas could be kept. I don't think like, I mean, like, shouldn't you or I just keep Isaiah Thomas?
No.
Like if
Why?
for 76 bucks, he's going to miss half the season, but then he comes back and he's Isaiah Thomas, and
How,
he's going to be one of the
like a
best
1 year keeper? Like
pieces available.
how long would you keep him for?
Maybe two or 3 years.
I mean, he's supposed to come back in the half season, but that's still a risk, right?
It's a
Yeah, dude,
risk,
this
yeah.
hip
And he's still
thing.
like a 30. He's still like an older player. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah,
It seems like risky
he's turning 30. This hip thing is scary, Horn.
All
in a
right,
new
so fine.
situation.
So let's assume. All right, so let's assume that's too risky. You don't like Nurk for Week?
No, I actually I like the Nurk side of this. But I think it's kind of at value. I don't know that I would go out of my way and like give him a
Right.
slot and some other shit for him.
Right. One of my concerns for Weeg is, and I mean, I don't love expensive keepers, and I love Karl Anthony Towns and I love Jimmy Butler, but once you tally tally up what those guys are owed, he's just not left with the same kind of stack as some of his competitors. So Towns will be 101, Butler will be 63. And
His max bid is actually the second lowest max bid in the league for what it's worth.
yeah, yeah.
The
There's
first
like a little bit
lowest
of it.
max bid is hilarious to me.
Is it Amish?
Yeah, it's illegal. It used to be negative.
No, it's not illegal now, right?
No, now he's barely above water.
Yeah. So the expensive keeper piece just concerns me a little bit. Where but it's also nice to have to know who your star guys are, and worry about the lower half of the roster. Um, so what, Lusky, what if anything can you see that we should be thinking about strategically? What would you be thinking about strategically if you were in his shoes?
Well, I'll tell you in full candor. I was really encouraging Weeg to either top or make a move for or just draft Steph Curry. I have an undying love for Steph Curry. I think that he wins championships, and I think he'd be a really good fit on this team. Butler certainly hits threes, and Towns hits some threes too. But I just feel like he could add, he could like solidify those percentages, become dominant in threes, add some assists to the mix. Like I think that going out and getting a guy like that would really help him.
That would be a very Dirty Dog Nation 16-17 kind of thing, to just be very top heavy.
Yeah,
Take your chances on filling out the rest of your roster, but knowing that the cavalry's coming when the arms race begins.
That's right. I mean, that's exactly where I'm at with him. Is like he's got these two top 15 assets, right? Go get a third. Like, yeah, it means that you're filling out the rest of your roster with like $2 guys, but whatever. Like some of those $2 guys will pan out and become keepers, and then you've still got three top 15 guys that are leading you along the way.
Yeah, like somewhere there's a Plum Dog millionaire for Week.
Oh yeah.
Do you have you talked to Weeg at all? Have you advised him at all about like how to think about trading Karl Anthony Towns when the time comes, or is that a conversation you'll have with him in strict confidence in January or February?
That'll be a
'Cause
January. February. We
it's very
we don't talk about Towns at this point.
yeah,
Maybe
it's
we
very
all do.
it's very sim Maybe you should make him an offer. It's very similar to the Westbrook situation, where he's got another year left on his elite player.
Yeah.
So Height, you were gonna do Jones. Do you want to take Jones out for a spin?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, going off our discussion of Muck free throw, it's interesting. He basically planned this a year out, which I don't know that that's happened before, where somebody said like going into the Muck season, not only am I going to punt the season, but then next year I'm basically indicating already that I'm mucking free throw. I mean, you were so hesitant last year. It was pretty obvious that you were going to do it, but you were so hesitant to tip your hand. Which is good and bad, I guess, for Jones. He was able to plan, but then obviously everybody knows it's pretty clear when somebody's doing it what their strategy is.
But it also, I found last year, and I think it was effective. I maybe I'm giving myself too much credit, but by the time we got closer to the auction, like in the last week or two, I actually did tip my hand because I was hoping to clear the field. like I wanted people to know that like I'm claiming this space. Everyone needs to back the fuck off. Everyone knows that if two or more people are bidding on these guys, then it becomes totally, untenable for everyone involved. So I think Jones, did that times 25 weeks or whatever. He, nobody is like in a serious way, at least it seems to me, going to challenge him. At least sort of full throttle for those kinds of players. So I mean, he's well positioned in that way.
Yeah, I mean he's got obviously the two big keepers. Embiid obviously needs to stay healthy, and Whiteside should be fine. And then he has a third slot, right? Which I don't know. Looking,
Yeah,
He's
I'm not
talking
sure.
about like I don't know, man. He's talking about some crazy stuff.
like Ben
Are you are
Simmons.
you are you are you at
No,
liberty to
he's
say? Are you at
talking.
liberty to say?
I don't know, man. No, these are like real cheapies on that roster. There's one. There's actually
Oh,
one
Boban.
cheaper.
Boban. Is he going to keep Boban?
He may have mentioned
Oh
Boban.
yeah,
Um,
there's a
but
Slack channel for Boban that got a
but
little out of him this week.
actually, there's a $0 player on that team that I really like that I actually think will be a good keeper.
Ingles.
Yeah, like Ingles is gonna fill a big void for Utah this year, and I think I doubt that he becomes like, first of all, I don't know that you keep him multiple years. I don't think I would, and I doubt that he becomes like some top 25 player. But I think at $10, there's zero chance that he doesn't deliver far above and beyond that.
Yeah, I mean slots are going for 10 now. I don't know. It seems risky. Like he's 30 years old. Like how does somebody like not get a chance to do whatever we think he's going to do before he's 30?
Well, he's never really had the opportunity that he had last year.
Right.
So I think Joe Ingles is a fine basketball player, and obviously there is a big gaping hole in that team. And he's on every sleeper list.
Yeah, he was on every spreadsheet.
Um,
And
yeah,
then Jones
I think
told
the problem for Jones is that Embiid is not going to play in enough games for this to be. I mean, I hope Embiid plays in a lot of games for Jones's sake and for NBA's sake, but it's hard to go fully. It's hard to be fully committed to the strategy when the centerpiece of the strategy might only play in half your games. So he's
I
on a
mean,
little
he
bit
could
of a
go
sticky
after
spot.
like the backups, right? He could go after Rashawn Holmes,
Rashawn
Okafor,
Holmes, right? That's a good
right?
idea.
To at least handcuff
Yeah. Yep.
the
That's a good
inevitable
point.
Embiid nights off. But yeah,
Um,
so in general, it's just interesting. Like, we'll see what he does if he makes any more moves before the draft. But obviously, we kind of know the guys that he's going to target, and we'll see like if he can pull it off this year.
um, I'm gonna do the next one, and let's just accelerate these a little bit. I'm gonna do the Keep Show. I haven't studied it super closely, although I do talk to Phil and so have thought about these guys a bit. Um, he is actually in a really good place. He has I mean, is Giannis the best keeper? Is that accepted?
Yes.
yeah.
By like a long shot, right? Like
Yeah.
nobody's even close.
I mean, how much would Giannis go for on the open
Uh,
market, right?
yeah, by a long shot, by
160,
a
100.
ton.
He's got like $125 of savings or something, right?
What's his price this year? 44?
44, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's like $130 savings.
Yeah, there's nobody like that.
No, no,
Um,
nobody.
so I mean that's insane. Um, he's got and then he's got these two guys who he has been committed to for I think longer than any of us would have been committed to them, and he has he's sort of you know he's almost like a martyr for them. It's like a year ago I think we were giving Phil a little bit of shit for Schroeder and Russell, um, and now those guys both have matured, and I think are going to pay dividends for him. I think Russell for sure. I think he's in a situation that's 1,000 times better than the one that he was in Los Angeles, um, and has already shown in preseason like what that looks like. Um, and Schroeder too. Like Schroeder, I don't love the idea of Schroeder being like the centerpiece of the offense on a shit team. Like that's not a great look for Dennis Schroeder, but um, it's still going to be a lot of stats, and he has been more consistent over the last 2 years. And And it's $30 for what I would expect would be. I mean, he has these two guards. I mean, Phil can go out and get another like elite point guard and just be really, really strong in the position. He's got Giannis too for dime. So he's just in a really nice spot, and then he's got slots to play with.
Yeah, he's got
And
a
a lot of
fourth
fun.
slot. Who's the so do you think that fourth slot is used on someone currently on his roster, or do you think that he hangs out?
Well, I don't think Phil's going to sell the slot. I think Phil is going to look for other. I would think Phil would look for other players who he likes. He's already made some moves, right? He acquired Cousins, right? He traded for Cousins, right?
Yeah, I think he got him as part of a slot deal or something. But I actually think he should keep Cousins. And I
Over
think
over
that
over over over, over Covington. I mean, Covington's the other guy there that stands out.
yeah, um, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, maybe
Like you can
Covington,
go, you can go get so Cousins for 110 plus a slot. Like you can get Cousins for pretty close to that next week,
maybe.
right?
Yeah, I think that if he did keep Cousins, Cousins and Giannis are just such stat stuffers
Yeah,
that like if you keep those guys, you're actually Russell's a good part of this strategy too. You're in a really good position to do a kind of like a soft punting of free throw then. And the nice thing
right.
about doing a soft free throw from that standpoint, because like Giannis isn't that bad, Cousins isn't that bad. Russell's not that bad. Like none of them are great, but none of them are good for their position at free throw. And you can kind of see how things stand and how they shake out from a free throw perspective. And then like maybe mid-season you can make the call like, you know what, I can take on Drummond or I can take on Gobert, and it's not a big deal to me because the furthest I could fall is 2 points.
Right. Yep. Yeah, that's a good call. Lusk, you're up next. Who's your second one going to be?
So my next one, I'm not going to say. So this is interesting. So this is the manager who is tied for second place in cash position with Mr. Height. Do you know who it is, Mr. Height? It's
No.
kind of shocking. It's Scotty B for three. Isn't that kind
Why
of
is that? Wait,
amazing?
why does that shock you?
Well, remember, I mean, Scott was a seller up until the trade deadline last year.
Right, right.
And
Although
so, and,
I've been pumping. I've been like capitalizing Scotty B for three all summer.
what do you mean by that?
I gave him 15. I gave him 15 for a slot and Torian Prince. And earlier in the summer,
Yeah.
I gave him $7 for Jonathan Isaac. So
Yeah, I think
I've
he's
pumped
been pretty
$22
smart
into both
about
my
like
pockets.
yeah, he's been pretty smart about like filling up his arsenal, heading into the draft. Like, so sure, he's only got one keeper, but I think it's probably the second best keeper. Well, okay, maybe that's a little far when you consider like the Jokic's and Miles Turners of the world. But Westbrook
And
himself
go and go
does
and go and go and Gobert and Towns. Like
no, but
there's some
Gobert. I mean, how much of a savings do you think Gobert is? Gobert's gonna be
what is
38. How much would he go for it off auction? 80
100,
bucks, 90 bucks?
100 block
You think
scarcity.
Gobert breaks triple digits?
Call it 90.
I don't know. I think Westbrook at open auction goes for $180, right? Just because just how much he does. And so anyway, $70 savings in one player. Plus he's got a fat stack of cash. Plus he's got an extra slot. And Scott's actually a guy who I think will do something interesting with that slot. Like he's not going to move it. He's going to go find a piece. I just hope for his sake, it's like a more swing for the fences type of player than what he's probably prone to do, which is like Scott, like he loves playing the value game. Right.
Right.
And like, I know for a fact that like before I think I mentioned this on a previous podcast, like before I gave my entire team to Peskin as part of the Fultz deal, like there were 100 guys on that team that Bookbinder was like, oh, like that's a pretty
Right.
nifty price.
All the Brook Lopez's and Gordon Hayward's and Marcus All's.
Yeah, right. And I hope for his sake that he uses that second slot on someone with a little bit higher ceiling that could mean more for him. Because I actually do think with cash and a top 5 player in tow, like you're not out of it. You're not out of it, despite what we all say about Gabe.
That's a good point about about like how he should use that slot, because especially when you have cash as he does now, like you can go buy those guys, like and he's good at that at the auction. Like he'll go buy the next Marc Gasol. Like you can find those guys during the auction, but it's a little harder to put the slot to the kind of use that you're describing. To get the equivalent value of what you're describing, you should do with the slots. I agree with that. Height, what's your number two?
I think it was Emmer
Okay.
Fascies. So yeah, I mean, he was similar to Jones in that coming in last year, he kind of obviously clearly had a strategy where he was just going to spend a ton of money getting future assets, and came away with Jokic and Porzingis, both at great deals. Obviously, Jokic, had his ups and downs last year, but turned into a pretty amazing asset. And then Porzingis will be, should be even better with Melo gone. And there's a third slot as well, right? That's not currently
not clear what he would do with it.
Karis LeVert, obviously.
No way.
So yeah, he has a third slot, and then decent amount of money, but the savings in those players should be enough that he's definitely going to be in contention.
I mean,
up until the deadline, and he has the number one UAFB DL pick next year, which I don't know who is left.
Darn kick.
In terms of who hasn't been drafted, but that certainly, the way things have been going, like that's a pretty big asset that he could, that he could move essentially whenever he wants to, right? He could do the Gabe route now and probably sell it for a ton of cash if he wanted to, or he could hold on and see like how long he can compete with what he has until he needs to move it.
Lusky, last podcast you were itching to talk about how you value these UAFB DLers, and we never quite got to it. I mean, you hinted at some of the points you wanted to make, but do you want to take a minute, no more than a minute, but a minute, and just talk a little bit about distill it as best you can, like how you think, not why we're doing it wrong, but what do you think the right way is to think about, for example, the number one pick to next year's UAFBDL draft, and then separately, but maybe relatedly, how to value somebody like Lonzo?
Well, in terms of like unrealized picks, I think that one's a little bit easier to explain, just because you don't know when at the time that you're making your UAFB DL selection, you don't yet know the context that player is going to be in. You don't know when they're going to be drafted in terms of what order, so that'll drive their price. You don't know what team they're going to end up on, which will drive how many minutes they're going to get, whether or not they're an opportunity to succeed. And so I just think that like the value of an undrafted selection is somewhat capped. Yeah. It's somewhat capped. Like, yes, you probably have a good idea that like this guy's going to end up in the top 3, but actually as we start to move forward here, that's going to become less and less, because a lot of the guys who are
getting shuffled, it always gets shuffled. Like,
yeah,
if you look at a mock draft from November and compare it to a mock draft in April, let alone the actual draft, like there's a lot of movement even at the very top.
Right. That's true.
So I think that's right. I mean, I paid $1 last week to move up 2 spots in the USBDL draft. I feel good about it. It's hard to imagine like paying a lot more, because for all we know, I moved up from 7 to 5. But for all we know, the guy who gets picked 7th in UFBDL will end up being a much better keeper than the guy who gets picked 5. Like it's just too, as you say, it's just too speculative.
Yeah, and then the as far as the like value of these keepers, like in terms of a guy like Dennis Smith Jr. or Lonzo Ball, the real issue with those guys is just that like I think it's very, very rare that a rookie comes in. Like Lillard and Towns are exceptions to this rule, right? But if you think about a guy like Russell Westbrook or Eric Bledsoe or Kemba Walker, these were players that were all highly touted lottery picks, came into situations where they were handed the torch on their teams, and it's like out of the gate they weren't dominant, right? Like Kemba was kept, I think, after his rookie year by height, but like he didn't become the Kemba Walker that we now appreciate until much later, when he had kind of like simmered in the NBA for a little bit and like figured out how to be efficient and how to be
right. That's more typical that it takes a couple of years for these guys to.
Yeah, and
but it might be changing. Like it could be changing in the NBA, right? They come out more polished potentially.
Potentially. I feel that way. I think it's a positional thing too. Like with Towns, I think that was true, but I don't necessarily feel that way about point guards in general. And so I guess what my sense is that because it's going to take these rookies some time to really get immersed and become valuable, and then you add to that the fact that you don't have the option to keep these players for 3 years. You have the option to keep them for 2 years. So they really have to hit in their rookie year for it to become this like big windfall. Otherwise, you're just like sitting around for another year waiting for them to be somebody.
So 2 things. First, don't ever exceed the allotted time I give you on this podcast ever again. And second, are you going to be I'm very curious to hear what the WCL reaction is to your sharing the Dennis Smith deal details.
Oh yeah, well I'm not sharing it until after I draft Dennis Smith in WCL. So actually, I'm going to take a detour for 1 second. So this is kind of messed up, but so WCL, we're on a really tight auction schedule this year. I'm flying in super late on Friday just because I don't want to miss work 2 weeks in a row, and I'm missing a lot of work for UAFBL, and then we have managers that have to leave like Saturday night. So we have this like really tight window to draft. And so what I agreed to is because I'm coming in such a terrible cash position because I went scorched earth to win WCL last year, is I said, look, you guys can go ahead and start without me. So I'm submitting a list to a surrogate.
Ooh.
And I'm basically saying like only draft on these players. No bids placed on any players not on this list are admissible. You know what I mean?
How many rounds are you going to miss?
It's TBD. I think it'll only be a round or two because like Randy initially wanted to wait for me, but I was the one saying like, look, don't wait for me because I'm in such a bad cash position. I almost think it'll be better if I sit out a little bit, but I do want to make sure that if any of my like prime targets come up that I can get my action in. And I'm putting in some pretty lofty bids on those guys just to ensure that I get them in the event that I'm out.
And this is relevant to UAFBL how?
Well, you asked me the question about Dennis Smith Jr. and how they're going to react to the deal, so I felt like you opened the door.
you drove a fucking train. That's it.
Here you go. You're like, there's like all this commentary on my response to your question.
Height, what do you think we should do about the fact that the Michigan game is at 11 o'clock in the morning on Saturday?
It's 11. That's what the local time is. Yeah, I mean, we should do 5 rounds. Like, let's do a bunch Friday. Like,
wow, 5 rounds.
Everybody's coming in Thursday. This is maybe the first year that everybody's in. So like we'll have all day Friday to like do whatever shit Books wants to do whenever the round table
the
debate's happening. Like, let's just let Books do whatever he wants to do on Friday morning, day, and let's just start drafting. Like,
we're gonna be working all day Friday.
It will not be. I can say that, but some people might.
Wait, working on the project?
I'm teasing. It should be like an hour. It's gonna take like an hour.
So we've got the project and we've got the round table.
The round table is gonna take like a year.
Regardless, back to the Michigan. Like, I just think we should draft as much Friday, and then, I mean, we usually don't start until like 11 or 12, right? I don't think we're gonna do early. Like, I don't think we're gonna start drafting at 9 or 10.
Wake up at sunrise and start drafting.
Yeah. I mean, maybe draft during the second half. Like, I don't know. Is that people? I don't know. I can't imagine people want to do that.
Yeah, I'm not really feeling that. I'm happy to draft Friday night. It's weird. I guess it just depends on how people call the players. A couple of years ago, I got on this kick of trying to convince everyone to call like shitty players the first couple rounds, and I feel like that's becoming a little bit more fashionable. Not originally, but like in the early days, the first round would just be like the top players. It was like, it was as if we were doing a snake draft. And I think there's still a bit of that and I understand why people want to have some certainty about what their building blocks are going to be. And if they're going to miss out on an elite player, they need to know that early so they can plan around it. and I understand that strategically, but there's definitely more willingness to call more random, the JJ Reddicks of the world in the first round, which I think makes it more fun. It's a little weird to do 5 rounds Friday night and then like have all of the best players off the board and be left with like, looking at George Hill going into Saturday morning as like the best available guy. But I think for the sake of I don't think we've had a Michigan game that early. I don't remember having this problem in the past.
I feel like we have, but it's always been like shitty games, right? And maybe
Right,
this
I guess
will
for a
be
long time, that's actually a good point. For a long time of our time at Fox Creek Ranch, Michigan was just terrible, and we were all comfortable, like, skipping the second half of like a Brady Hoke shit show.
Yeah. And then the last year or two, there have been night games, which has been fun.
Not that Minnesota game. That Minnesota game where we almost lost. That was that was at the Ranch the one year.
Right, but it was late, wasn't it?
Yeah, it wasn't. I'm pretty sure it was a night game. Lusk, any new features at the Ranch that we should know about?
Good question. I'm sure there's stuff that we'll notice when there's Weeg was asking me about the coffee situation. There's a new Keurig machine.
Mm.
And there's a new coffee maker as well. The coffee was a hot topic. I had 2 or 3 people reach out to me about making sure that we have more coffee available this year.
And I reached out to you about the soft drink options, which just tells you the coffee and soft drinks just tells you sort of where we are in 2017.
Yeah. Actually, so interestingly enough, I think most people are aware already, but Franklin Barbecue had a fire probably about a month ago, and they're still not reopened. So we shopped around for a comparable elite barbecue place, and we're going to be we have a pre-order waiting for us, or it will be waiting for us at a place at a top 10 ranked barbecue place called Micklethwaite Meat Company. And so it's my first time trying it, but it's supposed to be top 10 in the world.
Top 10 in the world.
Yeah.
Well, top 10 in Texas, which means it's top 10 in the world.
Although, I expect it will be extraordinary, and thank you for doing the diligence. Although, like that Texas Monthly list also led us to the place in College Station that we didn't love.
Well,
It's a little.
What I would say is the place in College Station went to. So Texas Monthly only ranks the top 10. They have a list of like the 50 others, and that place we went to in College Station was on the 50 others list. So this one was ranked, got a number ranking. It's like number 7 or 8. So hopefully it lives up to the hype.
Are there any other spots around
Yes.
in or around Grimes County that we haven't been to that we should check out?
Yeah. So on Friday, now we already talked about how much we got going on Friday, but on Friday morning, it might be worth sending an emissary or two to this place called Truth Barbecue, which is it's in Brenham. It's probably an hour from the ranch.
Brenham is back where the ice cream is, right?
Exactly. It might be less than an hour. It might be more like 45 minutes. But Truth Barbecue is also ranked in the top 10, and their place, it's one of these places. I think it's only open like Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, and it's open from like 10 a.m. until they run out of meat.
Yeah. That could be a good field. That could be a good field trip, depending on how Friday looks. On the roundtable thing, I just want to be clear because I started this in a way by sending that email just before Weeg was ready to tally the votes. I'm not envisioning, at least from my perspective, I was never envisioning like a fucking roundtable. I was just envisioning that over the course of the couple of days, people would be having conversations, not all the time, not exclusively, just as these things come up, as they do when we talk about UFBL. And it would just give people a better level of comfort with where they stood on some of these proposals. So, well, I really hope that there's not like a sort of a allotted period of time where we're all supposed to like sit and talk about this shit.
Well, I'll just say I'm glad you raised your hand. I wish I had it because I actually reached out to Weeg and I just said, look, man, I'm torn on one of these. I was torn on probably the most controversial issue on there. Which was the cap floor. And I said, I don't think I'm ready to vote on this. And, he said, I'm in the same boat. He told me what he was doing is he was voting yes. And because there was a phased in period that we would always have the opportunity to kind of like rethink it. But I didn't feel comfortable with that. And so I'm glad that you chimed in and said, let's pause this.
Yeah. That vote, I think happened later in the summer than it's supposed to. I think T-Mac has other stuff going on and wasn't able to do it, and asked Week to do it, and I think things just got delayed. I mean, it's strange to be having this extremely contentious vote just like 2 weeks before we were all going to see each other, where I don't think my sense is that we haven't really like gotten to the bottom of that controversial proposal, the cap salary cap / floor. So again, the idea is not that we like dedicate ourselves to speaking about it the whole time that we're there, just that like we give it a little more time to sort of air out, and that when we all are face to face, if people want to talk to Emmer, if you want to talk to Peskin, if you want to talk to each other, it just provides an opportunity to do that. So that's all. So yeah, let's go get some barbecue. Anything else, guys?
No, I mean, anytime you want to talk about the Slack Dads channel, I'm ready. We can say that.
Why don't you have me onto the Rogue Pod, and then you can ask all the questions you want.
That sounds good.
All right, guys. Have a good night. See you next week.
All right, thanks. See ya.
All right.